I think you posed a good question because I'm still curious about your thoughts on that, like where this plays out. Like, does it even matter to you? Like,
For me, at this, I don't know. See, it is like you said, is really contextual because if I started training in jiu-jitsu, BJJ, I think I would be kind of into that whole structure. Like, dude, I'm a, like knowing that you're a purple belt, it's like, yeah, yeah, Danny, like you know some stuff, like, you know some stuff, and so you know, I but um, but yeah, it is contextual, because and like you said in the previous one, like I don't really have that much interest in karate, at least in like the general sense here in the States, like whatever karate is, like I don't have any desire to practice like Wing Chun. I think it's Wing Chun is really like really old school, you know. These bunch of these kung fu schools used to, they always like fought each other and stuff. So I mean, it worked in that context, like in the 1950s. But the world is moving so quickly.
well, that's what I always wonder about how people tested themselves or what kind of fights that they have. Because I think about, um, yeah, so I mean, I'll repeat this story if we record it again, but I think about like the people that I've known that were fighters, like my grandfather, my uncle. And by fighters, I don't mean like professional fighters, just that like they were people that were known as being able to handle themselves in their towns, among our families. They didn't take any classes, man. They didn't. They just were always fighting, and they lived in a world where I think they knew that there were some people that were professional, like for sure boxers. I know my grandfather was big into boxing. So he knew that there was this discipline that you could learn how to strike within the field of boxing. But he was known as being super strong and aggressive, and all these narratives are like, oh, you should have seen him when this happened. And then my uncle the same way, like these are stories of him they locked him in a room with like four guys, because they were gonna jump him, and he came out, and the other guys were just devastated, But I'm just thinking like that guy, he's older now. He's like in his 70s, but I got to meet him when he was still strong, like in his 60s. And he was still scary in his 60s. Like 20-year-olds were scared of him, because he was still that same guy. But to your point, how would he have matched up if he had been asked to like get into a Wing Chun stance, or if someone had told him put on a karate gi? Would he have followed the rules, or would he have fought how he normally fights and just devastate people? I don't think he ever kicked once, but he probably did some grappling, some holding, some neck cranking, biting. That story that I tell you, he bit the guys. One of the guys I think lost a finger, because dude, they were trying to hurt him, and they lured him into the room, and they locked the door on purpose to hurt him. And he thought he was fighting for his life.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, that's different. So talking about context, man, I don't know. I think he would suck as a boxer. Like, I don't think he would be this famous person if he had been trained in boxing.
Yeah, because like in especially in old school kung fu, anything was up for hitting. Like groin shots, dude. There were techniques to, yeah, dude. You kick him in the
Yeah.
groin. You got to protect everything because everything is up. Like there's no rules. You know.
So I'm returning to this question of like, how do we make sense of martial arts? And I'm enamored with the field. I like the field a lot. Um, I like how we think about it as this like uber intellectual thing in a field that is practiced. So there's people out there they don't care about this history of where it comes from. They want to know, does it work or does it not work? But then they also want to know, I think, unfortunately, it goes incomplete when we say if it works in the ring, it works in the street. I think there's probably like a 90% accuracy, so that like it goes like this. If I'm only allowed to use my hands and I can beat you, I should still be able to beat you if I can use my hands and my feet in the street. But what if I've never learned to use my hands and my feet? Because I think, people talk about like who's the best fighter, and like it depends. If it's in the ring, some of the best fighters are boxers. But if you're allowed to grapple, they're not. If you're allowed to scratch and bite, I don't know. I mean, there's always this debate with jiu-jitsu. It goes like this, that people who say that their art is too dangerous to practice and they're holding back against a jiu-jitsu guy or jiu-jitsu woman. So they'll say things like, for example, well, if you were to grab me on the floor, I would poke your eyes. Well, the comeback to that is, well, if you poke my eyes, I will bite your nose while I'm holding you in my guard. I mean, like, if you want to go into biting or poking eyes, well, I can do that too, but I have another skill. I'm just saying, like, I can even you out really fast. If you do that, it messes up the formula. But let me just throw a little messed up, or let me mix it up a little bit in things that make no sense and maybe contradict themselves. So when I was doing karate, I had started doing jiu-jitsu, and there was this guy, his name is Gary, who trained. I loved his classes. Every time we went to his classes, I think I shared before that, like when I moved back to LA, I used to train with this independent student-led run Shotokan group that just aged into being in their 60s. So this group was like that, and all my teachers were like older men. And Gary was this guy that every time he ran his sparring session, it was very street application, very street. And we were sparring, and he swept me, and I pulled him into my guard. And this sounds rude, but he grabbed my crotch, dude, like fully. That was his response. Like I went into the guard, and I might have been, that's what I did. I got in the guard, and I was trying to set up an arm bar. So if anyone knows how it looks like, is the person is like tripoding down, and I'm on the bottom, and I'm going for an arm bar, and I'm getting it. Well, with the other hand, the one that isn't getting arm bar, he grabbed my crotch fully, and then he says it in a very menacing way, like, "What are you gonna do, man? What are you gonna do?" And I just start laughing and like, go and get up. Now, I have a feeling that if this was a real fight, I probably would not have let go. If it was a real fight, I would have tried to break his arm. But I would have risked severe injury, because there's no way he's going to let go of his grip. He was still going to hold his grip, probably hurt me as much as he could, and only end up with a broken arm. Which I don't know if that was enough for me not to escape injury if it was a real fight. But on that moment, I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. Like, no one had ever done that in jiu-jitsu. No one goes for your crotch to defend an armbar. But this guy did. And to your point, no one thinks of karate as being able to handle jiu-jitsu. But on that day, I felt that it would have worked. Like, if it was a real life and death, I probably would not have let go. But would I have been able to survive? I mean, you don't die from having your genitals squashed, but I think the pain must be ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing about MMA, about American MMA, is that, I remember this was in 2003. I was watching this the Japanese fighting league. I don't know if it's Pride or something else. Something, sometimes, in the Japanese, the older Japanese leagues, they would match up some crazy matchups, right? Someone who's like 150 pounds versus somebody who's like 250. But I remember in this one in particular, they allowed digit manipulation. Like you can bend fingers, twist toes, and stuff like that, because that's a little bit more real. I mean, if someone, I remember if someone, when I was, I took a few classes in Filipino martial arts. I remember, you know, there's a situation where if someone's choking you or grabbing you somehow, you could like just crack their finger. You could like, twist their you can kind of try to rip off their fingernail. And this stuff is it's all fighting on the street. It's dirty. Everything's on the table, and it yeah. And then so thinking about rules, like I think sometimes even MMA, what works on the street is still confined into a rule set, and it still becomes like you said a tradition, or will become a tradition, or is already a tradition.
Yeah, and there's two things that I think of. Like, there's something to be credited about the critique that, like, poking an eye, biting, trying to break fingers, is not the way to go when thinking about, like, my art is good, but I'm not allowed to use these techniques which are too lethal, because especially in jiu-jitsu, we always argue, well, we can do that too. If you start biting me, I could probably try and poke your eyes too, but you're in a worse shape because I also have you in a Kimura hold, so I'm going to break your shoulder, And the other part also to talk about like more real life based assessments of violence. For anyone who's been in fights, you don't remember when you break your fingers. You don't remember when you broke your toe, when your nail fell off. So that's what's really weird about these self-defense moments where, like, well, if someone grabs you here, grab the finger and bring it back. That only works in a calm assessment. No, like, you're going to bend it back, it's going to break, and the person doesn't even feel it. Surprisingly, like, those things are really weird because I look at my hands, and my fingers are all broken. I heard them break when they happened. And they don't feel like you think they feel. You just hear the pop and you keep doing your thing.
You're a real martial artist, Danny.
No, I'm just a stubborn person that keeps going back to class. But I think you're posing a really strong question of, like, comparing traditional martial arts with, like, MMA as a sport, but also I think reality-based fighting. And I don't invest a lot in reality-based fighting, even though every martial art class that I remember for the past 30 years was the idea that it was reality-based. I remember being in karate and using fake knives to block, which now I'm going like, never. No, I'm never trying to do a block on a knife. Never.
Yeah.
But I remember those moments. Why did we do that? I don't know. I don't know why we did that. I remember training against, like, if someone does a choke hold from behind, here's how you're going to do. You're going to do a groin strike, a foot stomp. Some of them I appreciated. They might have worked. Some of the newer ones I appreciate better. Like, I really like the judo techniques, like where you dump the person on their head going forward, against it, or the jiu-jitsu, try escapes. But I do realize that you're posing this question of reality-based martial arts versus quote-unquote traditional. But I find that traditional, it's a misnomer, because they were at one point trying to teach you reality-based fighting. And maybe maybe what's happened is that they were left in a sequestered classroom, you know, and that's probably what happened. But I'm curious. I mean, I'm just thinking about you as like someone who's taken on Muay Thai. How do you see it? What does Muay Thai mean to you? Where do you place it? Is it a traditional martial art? Is it a reality based martial art?
It's sporty for sure. I think there's a lot of real life applications, but it's within a sport. You know, like it was within a ring. Um, if I catch a kick, I can only step twice. You know, before before getting stopped by the ref, or I can't kick somebody's back or their spine because that's illegal. Things like that. I mean, and even catching a kick, there's certain techniques that I'm not allowed to do. I think, especially how the sport has grown through the years. I think because there's one technique that I learned, like you kind of like step back and you can kind of like twist their leg or their foot or something, and like the person has to fall down or else they'll sprain their joint. And I later learned that that's not allowed, and I'm like, oh, that works so well though, so Muay Thai to me is definitely kind of sporty, but at the same time, it's something that I think could be used in real life. I mean, with like elbows and things like that. If someone tries to grab me, or and but see, there's also things like when I'm spar. There are things where if I spar with a newer person, some of my fakes don't work because they don't read the movement of my body the same way someone who's a little bit more familiar with the sport. They wouldn't catch certain details that I would throw out and try to confuse my my opponent. So it is kind of interesting to see how people react to things, because in a real street fight, there's no faking or feeling it out. It's just going. It's just, there's no hesitation, or else I'm going to be the one that's going to get beat up. But at the same time, it's like, oh, but the best way is not to be in that situation at all.
I think that's a way. That's probably a distinction right there for martial artists. When people think about the distinction between like a practitioner and a martial artist, and I hear those talks. I've been around them where people say that's old school, that's lame, even to talk about like tradition, martial arts, respect, mastery. If it doesn't work in the street, what's the point? I find that analysis or that point of view, I don't like getting dragged into that world, because then it takes away why I do what I do. Because like, for example, you mentioned this, like, I shared that, like I have a bunch of broken fingers. I remember the first time I broke my toe in karate. And I remember it. I was like, I was an undergrad, and we went to Palo Alto to visit another dojo, and we were sparring, and I was a green belt, and there was a brown belt there, and we're doing rotation, and I was scared, because I was like, I hadn't really trained with brown belts, and they were intimidating to me, and this brown belt was really getting annoyed that I wasn't engaging, so he's like, kick me, and then he throws a kick, and then I throw a kick. And when I throw the kick, he picks up his knee, and I kick his shin or his knee. I don't know, but I kicked it wrong. And I heard my toe snap, pop. And I was like, oh, there goes my toe. And then the next day I can't walk. And like for 2 weeks, I can't. It's wrecked, man. I mean, like literally my toe is pointing the wrong direction, But all I could think about is this assessment of like reality-based fighting. Is like, in the street, I would never take off my shoes. Like, I was kicking barefoot. How lame is that? So I'm always confused about what does it mean to like, if it doesn't work in the streets, it's useless. Well, one of the things I feel confident is that I must have invested all this time because it was giving me something. And it can't be a belief that I could take on anyone in the street, because that doesn't make any sense. I've seen on everyone can probably look at champion MMA fighters getting knocked out in the street. You're like, well, because in the street, no one expects to be blindsided as they're walking, or no one expects, as you mentioned, a haymaker, like from an untrained fighter. It happens. So I don't think that's why we train. I think there's an element to that, which is important, that we train to feel that we can defend ourselves, or we have skill sets to attempt to defend ourselves, versus feeling like I don't know what to do. But it can't just be that, because one is that the shelf life is limited. Like as I get older, I'm about to hit in my 50s soon. I feel like that when Harry met Sally and she's crying that she's gonna be 30, and he's like, when? She's like, someday. So like when I think about, I'm gonna be 50 someday, not soon, but someday. And I'm realizing, like, does that mean I can't go to Muay Thai anymore? I can't do jiu-jitsu. I can't do karate. I can, just not the same.
Yeah. I think about that being older. At what point do I have to not do Muay Thai? But I want to do something. I want to continue with something. Judo or something. Jiu-jitsu, like hearing your stories of like, your broken fingers and sprained this and that, like every other week. I'm like, man, that's gnarly. I don't know. But at the same time, it seems so cool. Like people, have compared it to playing video games, or like it's like chess. It's really, there's a lot of factors to it. I mean martial arts and sparring, fighting, it's a thinking person's game. I remember and like you said, with different skill sets, it's definitely within a certain sport. I remember, Mike Tyson said, he's not going to try MMA. He said, seeing, guys get their foot stomped, he says that hurts. He said he doesn't want to get his foot stomped. But see, it's a mindset though. You see these like 70-year-olds with like bodybuilders, like, are super ripped and everything. It's just training the body, training the mind, to do better. And I want to continue being physically fit and strong as I get older, because we need to do it. We need to keep our bodies intact. Being weak and stuff, it's just not good for our health. And I sound like a jock, but no, dude, we gotta keep our bodies up.
But I think that's the distinction of why people train in martial arts. Like once the reality-based like content dwindles, there has to be something behind it. And it was always there for many of us, which is like one, like the pursuit of like your investment into your body. But I think also the art. You mentioned at one point, like it was about considering martial arts as like an instrument that you learn how to play. That's how I felt. In jiu-jitsu, it's a different feeling. In Shotokan, karate, it was different. In Muay Thai, which I recently started, the sparring felt like that. Because when I would spar, I was feeling the rhythm. I was feeling the sense of distance. And I was appreciating even the session. Like there were days when I was thinking about like, wow, that was interesting. Like, like I felt confident today, or that wasn't interesting. That I felt very frazzled. I couldn't get my sense of like control over my body that day. So all of that, I think we can keep going if our bodies permit. And maybe that's where a lot of us feel a little bit discouraged, because we can take care of our bodies, but there's limitations. I remember being in my 20s and training with men and women that were in their 50s, and they would tell me to stop. Like, I need a break. And I was a jerk, because in my mind I was like, we just started. And now I feel that I was like, oh, I need a break. and the person that's 20, 25, they don't. And I sit out. Like, when I sit out in the rolling session, I need a minute. And it's not positive. It doesn't, you're like, you don't feel betrayed, but you're like, damn it. Like, my mind wants to get more information by trying it, but my body says I need a break. But what I do find interesting is that even though I do have all these stories of broken body parts, I was always trying my best to not get hurt so I could come back. Whereas other people were trying to push their body because they didn't think, I want to train when I'm 60. And that's me right now. I keep saying that to myself, like, don't get hurt because you want to train when you're 60. And I think we can. It's just about knowing that it has to be something different. Because if you want to train till you're 60 because you want to beat up a 25-year-old, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that is.
I miss sparring so much. Like, I miss it so much because it's you know, it's like having a group of people there pushing me to do better. Like, I'm tired. I'll be super tired, but just have to keep on pushing, and it's fun. And it's fun when everybody's having fun, you know. But man, I miss it so much. When I'll get tested, Danny.
I think that's probably the hardest part. Huh?
I said, I'll get tested and I'll be negative and we can spar.
There you go.
COVID.
Dude, that would be awesome.
I'll get tested.
I'm trying to figure that out. Like, people are trying to open up their gyms right now. There's a lot of places that are opening it up. My Muay Thai teacher started. He put a bunch of protocols for safety, like even using a face shield, getting tested before you walk in with that thermometer, washing the hands and feet 6 feet apart. I don't know. And even jiu-jitsu is opening up too. I'm not ready yet, but I feel the pressure. Like, my body's telling me, like, what are you doing? Why are you just hanging out?
Yeah, that's good, because, you know, the gyms that I've seen, you know, the gym that I was going to and then I really like going to, they're just opened up. I mean, they have classes now, and you know, they at every hour and a half they, you know, have a cleaning session, but yeah, there's no, you know, physical distancing. There's no face masks or anything. I see people working out and stuff, and I don't know if there's clinch sessions. I guess not, but shoot, man.
No, and sparring is probably the one that's hard, I mean, to modify, you know, because, like, you're going to be touching, clinching, definitely you're in real contact, but even punching each other, you know, that glove is going to carry that sweat back and forth. Jiu-jitsu, there's just no way. You're grappling. You're on the floor. You're breathing on top of each other. There's just no way of doing that cleanly. But I find it part of where we are as we think about COVID-19 and its presence in our society. Martial arts are feeling it like every other field is feeling it. And I think people are realizing that, I don't know, that they can't wait. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. I don't know how long, but I am going to wait a little bit longer. I just need to figure out how to train by myself. I have a bag. I should be hitting the bag, but I can't get to it. I don't know. It's weird.
I installed a timer, like a boxing timer on my phone. There's apps on that. So, you know, I kind of have, because at my partner's relative's house, they have a little in the garage. They have like a, you know, like a mat, and they have a gym. They have a bag, and there's a mirror. So, I got to do some, when I'm there, I got to do some shadow boxing. Then I got to do some rounds on the bag. But it's not the same because I'm like, oh man, I've spent like half an hour. I'm tired. That's it. Whereas when I'm at the gym, like, oh, dude, it'll be an hour and my shirt is completely wet. So yeah, it is what it is. But it's good. It's good.
No, but we're gonna be okay. I think it's just about holding ourselves like safe so that we can get there. It's that same line that like we, at least in jiu-jitsu, we use a lot, which is like take care of yourself so you can come back tomorrow. And right now, I wonder if we can use the same kind of metaphor for it or analogy by thinking that like, don't get sick right now so that you can save yourself so you can come back, to your respective training.
Oh, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know, man. I want to get back.
With that said, this has been the Reroll Martial Arts podcast, where we discuss the intersections between martial arts, society, and culture.